that kind of concludes the WebSphere application server level tuning. So moving on quickly to core framework tuning, right? WebSphere Commerce server. I'm going to skim, breeze through some of this. You'll need to have WebSphere Commerce specific knowledge to appreciate of some of these aspects. So the first one is, right, every controller command, right, has a feature called isGeneric. What it really does is, WebSphere Commerce has three types of users, right? Anonymous users, guest and registered users. So commands that are not very user specific, right? You should mark the isGeneric flag as false. The advantage you have is, right, it will not flood your context tables. So WebSphere maintains context and activities in the database. So if you make even anonymous commands that have no user context also start logging in that, it will flood your database and it will start showing database issues. So that's one thing. The second is, make sure, don't blindly use access beans and data beans, right? Because, sometimes they're not efficient. A simple JDBC helper when you're reading from multiple tables, if you use some of these data beans, right, they'll be very, very chatty, making multiple calls back and forth from the database, retrieving a lot more attributes than you really need, and kind of, it'll definitely stress your database. So use simple, custom JDBC queries, when you want to access data from related database. The third thing is, this is an important aspect, right? In the system context diagram and the earlier slides, we talked about WebSphere Commerce having a lot of integration points, right? 50, almost like, at least 50 integration points, right? You could have up to so many. So, these integrations, right, we need to be very, very carefully reviewed, right? Always prefer asynchronous integration over synchronous integration because it kind of isolates your application from any response time fluctuations on the service that you're accessing. The service won't hold your application at ransom, right? The second, but having said that, right, you cannot always, do asynchronous, right? Things like emails, etc., can be asynchronous, but when you're doing address verification or computing taxes, etc., it needs to be synchronous because the user is waiting, right? The key suggestion I would give is make sure that every integration point has a separate connection and a read timeout. So let's say that you're connecting to an address verification service, and that service is down or not responding properly, right? If you do not specify a connection timeout, your JVM or your web container will just wait indefinitely to establish a connection, right? And a lot of threads will start queuing in your JVM, and then that will start affecting every other JVMs. And in a few minutes, or in probably 15-20 minutes, your entire application will be down and your cluster will be down. So we need to be sure that we have connection timeouts, read timeouts specifically captured. The last thing is, right, access and data beans. I told you earlier that access beans are used to call the underlying entity beans. The simple reason is it has access control policies. Data beans are used primarily by JSPs, not from the controller or the task commands. Couple of other suggestions on WebSphere Commerce specific. WebSphere has another concept of registries, right? What registries are nothing but it caches a lot of runtime, data that are very static. They don't change, like static text, country, state, jurisdiction, etc. Right? So leverage registries and make registries in data cache is very complementary in option. So leverage them. The last thing I want to talk about is bot calls, right? Bot calls are expensive. So when you're using, let's say you go to a page like you search for an iPhone page, right? It's a product detail page. It has a lot of information in it, right? Price, inventory, color, size, information, ratings, reviews, warranties, etc. Right? Each of these are attributes. So when you use a service like BOD, right, it actually reads the entire data. One product can have 340, 350 attributes instead of just lazy loading them as you require. So we have seen, some of the pages take up to 20 seconds when we use BOD, just came down to like 3 seconds. After we kind of replace them with simple JDBC queries. Finally, a promotion engine, right? WebSphere has a very sophisticated promotion engine. It's a very sophisticated one. But the challenge is it uses a cloud in your underlying data store to store the promotion data. Clobs are very, very expensive. And if you have a lot of promotions in your site, don't use clobs, because it will always do an insert and then an update, and it can bring your database to its knees under high load. So I'm moving on to the database tier tuning considerations, right?